Okay, this is kind of serious, and it's all based on electron flood theory, but it's about this electromagnetic fields, and they activate voltage gated calcium channels, and they can produce beneficial or adverse effects in biology. Now, they activate these electrons come in from light and they activate things. That creates photosynthesis, it warms you up, it does all kinds of things. Well, also they found certain frequencies activate and target these calcium voltages. Now, let's go down to where I have something highlighted, because they did a lot of research on here. What type of cell, and or the response measured, the type of EMF is electromagnetic force. And then the different stimulations, and it helps in bone growth and so forth. Now, there was something up here. They did a whole bunch of different studies and exposures and all this stuff. Here's where the important part starts, right here. All right. Earlier modeling of electrical effects across plasma membranes. Plasma is blood, like fluids, and membranes. So earlier modeling of these effects across these membranes of electromagnetic force exposures suggested that such electrical effects were just too weak, too small, they couldn't do anything. Too small to explain the effects at levels reported to produce biological changes. So they needed a certain level before there was going to be any biological influence. And they said, nah, you can't, this is just not enough there. However, more recent and presumably more biological plausible models have suggested that such electrical effects may be much more substantial and may therefore act to directly stimulate these voltage-gated calcium channels. Now, direct stimulation of these channels by partial depolarization across the plasma membrane suggested by the following observations discussed in this review. Now listen to this. This is instantaneous. Very rapid, almost instantaneous increase in intracellular calcium-2. Now, calcium-2 is way down here on the periodic chart. It's a reactive chemical. Instantaneous increase when you are found in some studies following EMF exposure, these fields. Now, what are the fields? EMF, electromagnetic fields. What are they? 5G and all these other broadcast frequencies, these are fields. Well, there's certain frequencies. Some of them are, some of them go, it depends, and there's a whole variety in between. It depends on where the molecules are. Actually, where the atoms and their electrons are. What frequency will stimulate them? Now, calcium gets stimulated, its electrons, in the region that is controlled by these microwaves and these very low energetic particles. Now, they also affect very high energy particles too. It's fascinating because this is nothing anybody's ever thought about before. It's just coming to the forefront. But here's what it says now. Let me just start over. And I'm not going to cut it out. I do this and get wrapped up in circles, but let's just start over again. The direct stimulation by partial depolarization across the plasma membrane is suggested by the following observations. So we see these things happen. Very rapid increase, instantaneous, in intracellular Ca2. Calcium goes into your bloodstream. The rapidity here means that most, if not all, indirect regulatory effects can be ruled out. All right, so in other words, nothing else is causing this other than the EMF exposure. Now, the fact that not just L-type, but 3 additional classes of these voltage-gated channels are implicated in generating biological responses to these exposures suggested their voltage-gated properties may be a key feature in ability to respond to these EMFs. So they're voltage-gated properties. Key feature. Most, if not all, of these fields effects are blocked by voltage-gated channel blockers. Now, I have to look into that because I don't know what those blockers consist of. Now, modeling of EMF effects on living cells can suggest that plasma membrane voltage channels may have key roles in such effects. Saunders and Jeffries stated that it's well established that electric fields or exposure to low-frequency magnetic fields, those are the kind of fields they talk about for broadcast frequencies and so forth, will, if of substantial magnitude, excite nerve tissues through their interactions with voltage-gated ion channels. They will, if there's enough frequency, there's enough power at that particular spot. If you're so far away it's just barely jiggling you, that's different. But if you're right up close and you're getting these low frequencies, which we always say, oh, that's no big deal, you can sit right next to that router, it won't bother you. Well, maybe it will. If it's of substantial magnitude, it can excite nerve tissue through their interactions with voltage-gated ion channels, these CAC2s. They further state that this is achieved by direct effects on the electric dipole voltage sensor within the ion channel. There's really nothing you can do about it if you're getting flooded with these frequencies. Now, let's just keep going. One question that is not answered by any of the available data is whether what is known as dirty electricity generated by rapid, in many cases square wave transients. These are everything works on square wave. I worked in electronics, I know it very, very well. Square waves are where you jump right up quick and you go across at that same voltage and you drop right down back to zero. All of your binary reactions are done with either a positive voltage or no voltage. Square waves. And you have an A clock and a B clock, and the A clock and the B clock only work on the high end of their cycles. And the A clock is twice as fast as the B clock. So the A clock goes like that, and the B clock goes way over here and down, and way over here and up. And so the only time these two are high at the same time is when data is transferred. But they're square waves. There's just zillions of square waves. And you get, I believe, it's pretty much square waves back and forth when you're we used to have DC to DC. Boy, I'll tell you, this goes back a ways. DC to DC converters. And it was an applied AC voltage or something. I can't remember now, to be honest with you. But it turned on and off the circuits really, really fast. And that gave you the pulsation that if you take one of those light-up displays and you shake it through the air like that, the old-time light-up displays, you'll see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4. They turn on and off. No two columns are ever on at the same time. You see them as on at the same time. But if you through the air like that, you'd see they display right out, because they're not ever on at the same time. Do it in a dark place, a light up display, and you'll see it. I believe. The old style, I don't know what they do now. They might all light up at the same time, but I kind of think they're strobed. Anyway, this is all very interesting to me, and I want to just continue on with this and see if we can figure out what effects they're having. I mean, what does it do? Because people are getting kind of crazy. I got to be honest with you. I think it's dirty electricity. Right? Let's just finish this up. Dirty electricity is inherent in any digital technology because digital technology is based on the use of square waves. That's what I said, transients. And it may therefore be of special concern in the digital era, but there have been no tests of dirty electricity that determine whether their roles in response to such fields, to his knowledge, the writer of this. The nanosecond pulses, which are essentially very brief but high intensity dirty electricity, do act, at least in part, to stimulate these, suggesting that dirty electricity may do likewise. Clearly, we need direct study of this question. Yes. Would you go to a car place and say, do you have a car that goes 200 miles an hour? And the guy says, oh, yeah, absolutely, here it is. He said, okay, let's go and take it for a ride. He says, sure. He said, let me just make sure the brakes work. He said, no, you can't use the brakes. We're not going to test the brakes. Just go 200 miles an hour and see what happens. Of course you're going to test the brakes. Why can't we test these things out? This is not something that can't be checked. It can't be. You do a database. What you have to do is do a SQL database. SQL is a relational database. You put in all of the figures, and then you say at certain voltage and certain times and certain energies and certain this and temperatures and so forth, what happens? And you'll find out that, you know, the guy goes into epileptic shocks every time a certain temperature and frequency. And I mean, that's just, sooner or later, these things will form patterns. That's the whole idea of SQL. And once you have the database in, you can query it just very, very simple and see what's going on there. Why are all these things happening at the same time to these same players? But it's research, you know. I mean, I can't do it. I have no ability to do this. I just talk. But I do a lot of thinking, but I can't really do much more than that, other than the light experiments and so forth. But they all seem to make sense to me. And you know, I'm willing to talk to anybody that's willing to be interested. But it doesn't seem to. People want to be interested in other people's research. I'm interested in everybody's research. If you can come to me with something that, like these neutrinos, this guy George Rana, I've been looking at him lately because he's got a lot of papers, and they all seem to be pretty good papers. So, you know, I'm fully invested in understanding if I'm missing something or if something new that I never thought about. Obviously, I want to know. If I'm wrong about something, I obviously want to know that too. And there was something the other day I came up with that I thought, oh boy, I think I'm wrong. And I think I still might be wrong. I can't remember what it is. I got to go back and look. I got it in my notes, in my stupid thoughts notes. I have a lot of those to go through. All right, let's just think about this. This is a study done on what happens to the calcium levels when you have spinal cord injuries. It says extracellular, that means outside the cells, that means in the fluid. And the calcium levels fall dramatically. Extracellular calcium levels fall dramatically immediately after spinal cord injury, while the total tissue levels of calcium increased. So it kept making the calcium, you just couldn't get it out into the bloodstream. So that's the issue here. Now, are we experiencing the same sort of situation with some of these other frequencies? I think they should be tested for this. So let's come back to this now. This, you know, spinal cord injury causes a lack in CA2. This says the very rapid, almost instantaneous increase in intracellular CA2 found in some studies following EMF exposure. Maybe people that have brain injuries should have EMF exposure. Maybe that is helpful. I don't know. They say this stuff does help for bone fractures and so forth. Now, I'm not going to get into any statements about that because I don't know. But I can tell you one thing. These frequencies, we're going to look at a frequency chart in a second. Some of them are blocked by certain types of atmospheric molecules, and that's why we don't get the damaging rays down here on the Earth. I'll show you the atmosphere is supposed to block certain things, and one of them it blocks is microwave radiation, and I believe it blocks the one that they are trying to force into the atmosphere for these new 5G devices and so forth. I'm not certain of that, but I would like to have somebody to discuss it. I'll talk about it. I'm pretty sure what I'm saying, but if I'm wrong, I'd like to have somebody discuss it with me and tell me why it's wrong. Well, we're going to look at the frequencies, and then maybe I'm wrong. We'll take a look and we'll see. Okay, let's just take it from the top. In the world of physics, they say it's a particle or a wave. It does both, but it's not one or the other at the same time. It's nonsense. It is a particle, and it spins. And you can see, you see that? It looks like the same waves, only it's a spinning particle. So it is a particle, and it spins. Now, how fast it spins and how big the particle is in question. However, the faster it spins, the more impact concussive value has. Way up here in the gamma rays, that's going to hurt you. X-rays, yes. Ultraviolet rays, yes. Does it penetrate the Earth's atmosphere? No, absolutely not. The particles in our atmosphere say stay out. The visible range, the Earth's atmosphere says, yeah, let them see, we want to be able to see down there, let them go down there. Infrared, yeah, let them warm up a little bit, and that end of the infrared. But on this end, stay out, and on the microwave, stay out too. No, you can't come through. However, we are going to be forcing, I believe, these radiation rays into the atmosphere to bring the signals all around. Now, these are the different frequencies in hertz, and this is the temperature of the bodies emitting the wavelength and so forth. These are the distances, these are like buildings, and the size of these waves. Now, just to give you an example of how long these frequencies are and how short they are. Gamma rays, X-rays, ultraviolet, very, very short distances, extremely short distances. You get into 60 cycle energy, that's electricity coming out of your wall. It comes out of your wall 60 times a second. All right, so 60 spins. So each one of these is going to be, guess how long? All right, they say it goes 186,000 miles a second. So every one of these is going to be about 3,000 miles long for the electricities coming into your house. It's as wide as the whole country. If that's right, I can't say it's right or not. All I know is I can see them spinning, I can see their particles, and I can see they have a positive and a negativeness to them, and I can see them separate, and I can see the energy. I show the things I can see, and then I conclude the things I conclude. Okay, my friends, Roger once again. I don't know who missed this. Cytotoxic, toxic to living cells. Okay, I don't want to make a joke out of this, so I'm going to be a little serious. This is about neuronal voltage-gated calcium channels. And what is a voltage-gated? It means a certain voltage allows the gate to open. They're channels voltage-gated. Voltage comes in, open the gate. They're going to talk about their structure, their function, and dysfunction. Now, let's just cut right to the chase. While calcium channels, these channels that can open and close, are of critical importance to brain function, their inappropriate expression or dysfunction gives rise to a variety of neurological disorders, including pain, epilepsy, migraine, ataxia. This review discusses salient aspects of voltage-gated calcium channel functions, physiology, and pathophysiology. Now, what is voltage gated? It means that these cells are excited. The electrical activity of neurons and other excitable cells relies on a number of different types of voltage and ligand-gated ion channels. A ligand is nothing more than a molecule that attaches to a transition metal primarily and just barely grabs a loosely hold of it, and they can fall off easily. Now, let's go deeper into this because this is very serious. It really is very serious. Now, if you want the details on this, it's very easy to find this stuff. Voltage, there's subtypes. Subtypes, pharmacology, and structure of voltage-gated calcium channels. There's two types. Voltage-gated calcium channels fall into two major categories. All right. There's a high voltage. You need a lot of electrons. Voltage, nothing more than electrons being pushed. So the high voltage, you need a lot of electrons to activate that channel. And that open in response to large membrane depolarizations. Depolarizations means you're changing the polarity. And low voltage activated channels that are activated by smaller voltage changes. Those are the little ones. They can just barely turn them on and off. Now, I don't know what each one of them does, but normally the more active something is, the more aggressive something responds to it, like a muscle or that type of thing. Now, And then it goes on and on and on about all kinds of stuff. But the point to take away from this is that these calcium voltage gated channels are changed if you add electrons, if you add electricity, if you add electromagnetic fields. And guess what that is? That surrounds us now like unbelievable. And they're saying this does have an effect on your well-being and your everything, the way you think, the way you feel. Let's just take a look and see what they say about it. All right, this warrants looking at in a little more than I just sort of skip over things. This goes back 7 years ago. Electromagnetic fields act via activation of voltage-gated calcium channels to produce beneficial or adverse effects in us. Well, voltage-gated means the higher the voltage, the more the gate is going to open. Now, the direct targets of extremely low and microwave frequency is what they're putting in this 5G now. That's in a microwave range. Let me start over again. The direct targets of extremely low and microwave frequency range electromagnetic fields, EMFs, in producing non-thermal effects have not been clearly established. Well, what's a non-thermal effect? There's no heat. You say, well, it's not heating me up. I'm okay. What's the big deal? Well, there is possibly a big deal because calcium starts absorbing these electrons. Now, listen carefully. However, studies in the literature reviewed here provide substantial support for such direct targets. 23 studies have shown that voltage-gated calcium channels produce these and other EMF effects such that the L-type or other voltage-gated blockers block or greatly lower diverse EMF effects. Furthermore, the voltage-gated properties of these channels may provide biophysically plausible mechanisms for EMF biological effects. Downstream responses of such EMF exposures may be mediated through Ca2+. Well, what is the Ca2+? Ca2+, calcium is over here on this side of the periodic chart. And they're adding another couple of electrons onto it. This chemistry going on there. If you push electrons into calcium, it will add electrons onto the base of calcium. And potentially physiological therapeutic responses may be largely as a result of nitric oxide. They're just saying it's going to change excuse me. I know I've gone long at this. Now, I'm going to wrap this up, but we're going to see one last thing that I think is going to shock you. Here's microwaves. Remember, the Earth will not let this stuff come through to us. And if we come down from the microwave range, right down to about here on the frequency hertz, we're 10 to the 8th, 10 to the 12th. So let's say we're 10 to the 10th, right here, 10 to the 9th. All right, that's in this microwave range, not supposed to be coming at us. And that's the frequency, 10 to the 10th, 10 to the 9th, right in that area. Now, what does that equate to? All right, these are the frequencies. We're talking about 10 to the 9th, 10 to the 10th. That means between 1.4 gigahertz, 2.4 is microwaves. Then you go up from there, all the way 10 to the 10th is 30 gigahertz. Super high frequency. Now, that's something to consider, to see when we introduce this, what's happening to our calcium channels? What's going on? What is the bodily changes that occur? Is there any? Maybe there's nothing. Maybe something good happens. I have no idea at this point, to be honest with you, but this particular range of frequencies is not like a burner. It's it's a shaker. And we're water-based creatures. All of our plasma, everything in our body is based around water, basically. And when we're shaking it, it's doing all its little things of grabbing and holding and transferring molecules. And when you're shaking it, I don't know. But we could certainly find out. I don't see there's any reason we couldn't find out. We could see what it does to the bacteria in the body, what it does to these calcium channels, what it does to all the different things that we can monitor. What's happening to the blood? There's a lot of stuff, trust me. We should at least look at it. That's my point. I can't do anything about it. Maybe you can.